Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Three Circle Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of having my man Jeddy Azuma on. Jeddy, why don't you introduce yourself and give a little bit of background so people know who you are?
Oh man, well, thanks for having me on the show, man. It's an honor to be here at the very beginning of this. I remember what that was like. For folks who don't know, I have an organization called The Rising Man, and it started with a podcast way back in the end of 2017. So we're like 250. Actually, we're over 500 episodes in, but like 250 interviews in. And I was
Wow.
just interviewing a man yesterday who was my fifth episode. He came back for another one, so it's full circle, right? Full circle,
hmm
three circle podcast. Introduce myself. I'm a father and a husband, and I'm fighting for my family every single day, just like many men out there in the world. I always lead with that because that's what holds up everything that I choose to do with my life. In addition to that, I've got a mission to initiate a whole generation of men into purpose-driven leadership, to be heart-centered men, and to be stewards of the land. And everything that I do underneath the banner of Rising Man and mentoring other men individually, one-to-one, doing some work with some tech startup companies too to help them with their leadership. It's all about helping to create a greater community, and purpose-driven leaders is how I believe we're going to do that. So that's me.
Yeah, man. No, it's been really cool getting to know you and seeing what you do. Rising Man has been, since I got in, like really impactful on me specifically because I had never known anything like that existed. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I think it was the first bonfire I was at out at Lou's Land being like, wow, if I had this growing up, I would be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many guys are missing that. So why don't you get a little more background on like what Rising Man is and kind of what you're trying to do down here in Austin with it?
Well, yeah, at first, I'll just speak to the more that I've done this work, I realize that I've actually been doing it my whole life, and that many men out there have at least the opportunity to be doing that their whole lives. Whether or not they get exactly what's available underneath this banner of men's work that we do, that's a different story. But it all started for me in sports. I've been an athlete my whole life. I played team sports. I find that a lot of the men who really resonate with brotherhood and camaraderie and supporting each other, doing things together as a team, have a background either in sports or in the armed forces, military background, because that's where you learn that it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about us, it's about we. And so I started getting involved in men's organizations beyond athletics when I was in college. So 17 years old, I'm 36 today. So coming up on 20 years that I've been inside of men's organizations. I would say 11 years ago was when I really got to feel what it was like to be held accountable by men, and to have men who wanted me to win, wanted me to succeed, but weren't afraid to challenge me, weren't afraid to push on the uncomfortable buttons that I didn't even want to look at myself. And I did that. I started sitting on a men's team, like a formal men's team, back when I was 25 years old. And I just got so hooked on it. The very first meeting that I was at, I saw two grown men in a moment where I really thought that they were about to go to blows. And I remember feeling uncomfortable in my body. I remember having that instinct of, where's the exit? How do I get out of here if shit starts to go down? And then witnessing these men and the other men who were in that circle just creating a container where the man who was being supported could break down. And within 5 minutes, both of those men were in tears and embracing each other. And just seeing how much range that grown men with capacity in their bodies can cover, I was like, okay, I need to know more about this. So I just got really committed to that and kept showing up with those guys. I still meet with those guys every other week, even though I'm several miles away. They loop me in virtually. And that was where I learned that there's a whole different degree of care and support that's available in relationships between men. And
Mm.
so I just wanted to make that available to especially men of my generation who had no clue what that looked like. When I started the podcast and I started Rising Man, there was 10 other podcasts that I could find. And I looked really hard. 10 other podcasts I could find for men, and half of them were about getting laid. And I was like, okay, this is what's available for men right now. Let's start something else. And now there's so much more. So I love that. I delight in that. I think it's wonderful that guys like you at your age are having these conversations in greater depth than I even did. It tells me we're moving in the right direction.
No, man, I definitely think it's really powerful what you do, and seeing the work firsthand and being hooked on it just like you were. It's like, oh, I think the first time we went, we did that grappling play movement with the guys, and I'd never done that. And I remember walking away being like, that was some primal kind of connective energy to another man who I'd not really known, but I felt like I could go to war with now just because we did this like little exercise. And it's kind of fascinating to see just how easy it is to do that, but we've forgotten how to do it right. But you need the container and the space and someone who's experienced to really lead that. I don't think there is a lot out there, like you mentioned. Half of the podcasts are, hookup culture, get the girl, get the car, get the big bank account. That's not really what a man is. That is more like just external values that are placed. And just because they're valuable, quote unquote, doesn't mean they're worth it, right? So I think my really big question is, at Rising Man, we have a lot of standards, right? So, what are the importance of having these standards, and what are the importance of having the rituals like we do with the candle at the beginning before every bonfire?
Well, first, speaking about standards, if I reduce it down to its simplest form, it's an exercise in building trust. And I believe that trust is the best currency and the most important currency that we have on this planet. So, creating standards is similar to the rules of basketball, right? If we didn't have rules for basketball and you and I were playing one on one, and I took a shot and I was like, yes, 3 points. And you're like, no, actually, if you have to shoot it from over there for it to be 3 points. It'd be like, since when? Since when? Then when did we make that agreement? And that's the thing about rules is rules are not consented to. Agreements and standards are things that we've all said yes to. And because we've all said yes to them, that means that we all agreed to be held accountable to them if and when that arises. Inevitably, standards are broken, commitments are broken. It happens. We're humans. And the way we restore trust is by demonstrating that we're recommitting back to those standards. So it's really just creating, I don't want to use the word game because I think that diminishes what standards are really for, but it creates a context in which we can build trust together. And with that trust, we can do so much more. Like you said, right? When we trust each other enough to throw each other around and use some of that primal energy, we can access parts of ourselves that society isn't comfortable with. When I know that I can go and spar with you and throw on some gloves, and I know that you're not out to rip my head off and we're going to make each other better, I can become better at doing that thing. But there's not a lot of, at least I've found that there's not a lot of places, especially for men, to explore that. And I was actually just having this conversation. I was just at the chiropractor's office and I was talking to a guy in there. We were talking about guns because we're here in Texas, right? And I don't have any guns. And for most of my life, I've been very averse to it. But we were talking about it that the most dangerous person when it comes to firearms is somebody who doesn't know how to handle it because they've never held one and they've never fired one. They've never been taught how to use it. I think the same is true for a man and his emotions, especially the big ones like rage and anger and aggression. Can't avoid those. And trying to suppress those, that doesn't work. I had this metaphor come through yesterday when I was talking to another man on a podcast. I said, asking men to hold on to our anger and our rage is like taking a grenade. I put it in your hand and I pull the pin. I say, hold on to that as long as you can. And now we're going to fill the room with all the people you care about too. How long can you hold on to that for? Right? I don't know how long you can hold on to it for, but I know it's not forever. And well, anyway, I think that speaks for itself.
No, man. I mean, rage is anger. Being a man, that's such a first instinctual methodology that we use to take back control because, oh, we're powerful. Oh, I'm in the driver's seat. And like you said, it gets out of hand pretty quick. You've never really been behind the, wheel of a Ferrari, right? You're going to hit the gas and your wheels are going to spin and you're going to start hitting people on the road. And you're like, what's going on? I thought this was easy. Like, I don't have to learn how to control my emotions. That's for wimps. And I think it's such a weak way out to be like, oh, I don't have to learn how to do this because it does take a lot more strength to be like, I don't know how to control a part of myself because I was never taught. And having the safe container to really do that in is so rare nowadays, right? So that's why I really like, going to the circle and just hearing those standards and being like, we have these things that you have to abide by, like the one of whatever we say here stays here, right? That I can trust, that I can get like the deep dark out and is going to stay in that circle. And I don't have to worry about going back to my mom or my friends or whoever else, right? Because if you don't have that capability, I don't think you can really learn, right? If
Mhm.
you're worried, like, oh my God, can I say this? Can I say that? Then you're always on the inside and not so much like present in the space, which is really cool when you gather around a fire with a lot of guys and you're really shooting the shit and like kind of talking and also getting deep at the same time. So it's something about fire and being a man that just seems so interconnected, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we've always heard, humans evolved with fire, right? So men, I'm sure thousands of years ago, were sitting around a fire, talking, maybe not talking, but grunting at each other, right? A little bit, and like having that similar experience. And there's something so impactful and powerful to doing that. I just wish more guys knew about it. So I definitely wanted to segue that into what do you think most young men are missing in their lives that this space provides?
It's a really great question, man. I was just, again, I was having some conversations yesterday. It's been a busy week from the podcast circuit. We were talking about bullying, and I'm 36 years old. Social media, Facebook was coming out like when I was in college, and there's not really bullying in college, not the way that there is in high school or middle school. And it just seems so much more difficult for young people growing up in this world when social media and Instagram and TikTok and online forums, people can be so harsh with the written word. People can be so dangerous with pictures and things that are shared. I mean, and it all comes from that same wounded place, right? I mean, we've all heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. People who bully others, they're not just born into this world doing that. There's some injustice or some violence or some negativity that has been directed their way that they then pass along. We know this. It's science based, it's evidence based. And so I think for young people, it's such a different world than I had to grow up in. And the things that people get picked on for or outcasted for, or the things that get pointed out by bullies, are often some of those individuals' greatest gifts. I mean, the classic one is the nerd, right? Everybody wants to pick on the nerd, but the nerd is the one who grows up and changes the world with their ideas because they were willing to think differently and think outside of the box. The nerd, I mean, and you've seen kind of the redemption story where the nerd, quote unquote, ends up being the boss of the bully, and it's like, how do you like me now? And I think that's the big. If I had to reduce it to one thing that I think most young folks are missing is just having the care and the direction that a young person needs to identify and recognize their gifts, and not to see their gifts as something that they should suppress or that they should cover up or that they should even completely ignore or get rid of. I think of how many young people have abandoned their passion at an early age because it wasn't cool. I mean, kids, they get fascinated and interested by the most unusual things. Sometimes you're like, what, where did that come from? And it's natural, it's innate. There's something that draws them to it. And I mean, without going deeper down the rabbit hole of the educational system being inundated and overwhelmed, there's just not enough attention. We as a society, we are so busy that we're not able to give that level and degree of attention and mentorship and guidance to young people. I think many folks out there are doing their best. God bless the teachers in the public school system, because really, I think they're just glorified babysitters at this point. I mean, when you've got a classroom full of 30 crazy kids and you got to just try and get them to sit still and do an exercise workbook. I mean, just getting half the class to get through that is seen as a success, right? And how many of those kids are flying under the radar and not getting the support that they need and the support that they deserve? So I think it starts there, and there's obviously so many other things along the way. One other piece of it would just be having strong, positive male and masculine role models. I don't think that I feel fortunate because I got a lot of what I needed from my father, and I had a lot of other great men in my life, but I still felt like I needed more when I got into my 20s. There was more about who I felt I was as a man that I couldn't replicate from my dad or from my coaches or from my uncles. I needed to go and find other men, and I did. But I think a lot of young men and boys are less fortunate than even I was, that they don't, or they have the other end of the spectrum, really negative examples, excuse me, and role models of what a man is.
Yeah. Dude, couldn't agree more. Growing up, I was the one of the weird kids who got bullied pretty bad in 5th, 6th grade because I'm ADHD, so I think differently, I act differently, and it's taken a long time to really get back to that baseline to get that gift. But there's so much to unpack what you said. I really wanted to start with the lack of role models, right? Team.
Mhm.
I know sports was a big thing for me, right? Being on a team, being a part of something, being around others who were a little further down the path that could guide me is so huge. And I did want to ask for, some people I think interchangeably use the word group and team, and we have something where you don't say
Mhm.
that and kind of unpack that so people can kind of hear the reasoning why.
Yeah. Folks who hear me and follow me, I am very willing to have the way I see things, and no one has to agree with that. But I've been taught by my mentors, the men that I respect, that we're a team and we're not a men's group. And the reason why we're not a group is because we define a group as a loose collection of people who don't have a shared vision. A group of men go and play pickup basketball, right? But a team of men, they practice together, right? There's a vision. They want to win a championship. There's goals, there's objectives. There's something that unites us because one of the most important things we can leverage as men is our ability to not make it about ourselves. I'll ask a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer this, but anybody who's listening, who's a man, who's the easiest person for you to sell out in your life? Of all the people, all the promises and commitments you make, who do you break the most promises and commitments to? And almost every time, every man's going to say themselves. All right. I would show up for you 100 times over and not do the same for myself. That's how I've been in my past and still can be. It's easier to sell me out than anybody else. We're hardwired to do that. And so that's why I like to bring in that context of team, because when we treat it as such, we're not necessarily going out and playing basketball together, but doing life together. We're teammates in life. I want you to win because if you win, that means we're all winning. As a team, we're winning. When every man is firing on all cylinders on his purpose, when he's navigating the hardships in his life, when he's able to overcome the obstacles and hurdles, or even when he does fall down, he picks himself back up. That's a win that inspires and motivates every man around him to do better in his own life. And if that just keeps ping ponging around, well, then all we have to do is just set the clock and watch things change. Now, I've seen men's groups, I've seen men's circles, I've seen open invitations. Come, anybody can come when you want. And then people come, then they go, and nobody sticks around because they don't get that sense that they're needed or that there's a commitment there. Um, so trust, commitment, it's all tied into the essential practice of being a man. And those things don't just happen by saying them. It's all about actions and experiential reps that we put in.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, dude, I always wanted to be part of something greater than myself, and I could never find a way in, right? Like the sports and didn't quite do it, didn't have that quite almost like being a part of a crusade, right? Like it's us against the world and it's our little band of misfits and we're going to see what we can do. And being a part of that now, it's like life changing to be like, oh, this is what I've been wanting my whole life, right? Because I do feel like I have to sacrifice something to be a part of it, you know? And I definitely noticed, I know I didn't have to answer the question. I definitely sold myself out the most, like hands down, time after time, and I don't know why. Like, I get it's hardwired, but I honestly, if you ask me, like, "Why did you do that?" I could not give you an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Well,
know if you
let's explore it a little bit, man.
alright.
You sold yourself out more than anybody else in your life.
Mhm.
Give us an example. What's one place that you sell yourself out the most?
Definitely in right now, I'm not doing enough, right? I sell myself short in the fact that, like, am willing to, you know, give everyone else, "Oh, you're doing enough. You're doing enough," and, like, give them that positive reinforcement and that commitment and see them and appreciate what they're doing. And when it comes to me, it's like, oh, you could be doing this, you could be doing this, you could be doing X, Y, Z, and the list never ends. And I just, denigrate myself for not being further ahead than where I should be at 23, right? Like I
Mhm.
should be, just as capable as a 30-year-old right now because you see all that social media, right? Then these super, super rare guys who are able to be that advanced at that, young of an age. So I definitely sell
Well,
myself.
they're also those guys are also showing you exactly what they want you to see, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
There's a couple things to it, right? One of the things that we all have to acknowledge is our basic biology, right? There's nobody more important in the world to me than me on a scientific biological level. In order for me to overcome my ego and my biological centers that are hardwired on self-preservation, I have to overcome that with my conscious brain. I have to choose to prioritize my wife, my kids. There's something a little bit primal in there, right? Defending my children, that's like defending my bloodline. There's some scientific and DNA based thing that's happening there. But when it comes down to basic preservation, my brain says keep this machine alive. That's the most important thing. Okay. So why would I sell that out more than I would others? I think it's really just having a different perspective about what is that dialogue that's actually happening. We're not prone to do difficult or uncomfortable things. We're not programmed to do that. Look at every other animal on the planet. You don't see a cheetah out on the savannah just doing 100-meter sprints for the fuck of it, right? Like it's not natural for us to expel and expend our energy and put ourselves through hardship. Now, in the natural animal world, animals go through hardship as a function of their existence. As modern humans, we value safety and comfort. So we have to generate these experiences for ourselves to go through hardship. And we find different ways to experience hardship. And we sell ourselves out because really, I'm just looking for safety and comfort within myself. I'm looking to keep myself feeling whole. And being on the edge of that comfort doesn't feel very good. So that example of selling myself out is I just don't want to make it harder on myself than it already is. Right? I don't want to wake up earlier because I'm fucking tired. I don't want to go to the gym because working out hurts. I don't want to start a business because failing hurts and losing money hurts and etc. Right? Those things, they don't feel very good. So we have to override some of our basic systems in order to do hard things. Now, why do we show up for people more than we show up for ourselves? Well, again, I think it's a basic biological function. I need other people in my life. We know is the whole lone wolf thing, right? As mammals, you look back at human history, humans, if not for modern technology, we wouldn't be able to survive by ourselves, right? In order just to procreate, we need we need other human beings. And we know that the humans who have functioned and thrived on this planet the longest were the ones who were able to do so in a cohabitative way, right? Cohabitative and collaborative way. That's how humans have done it forever. And yet, here we are in a society where modern convenience and technology has driven us away from that. But when given the opportunity, like you asked me to be on your podcast, I'm like, dude, I'm going to be there. I'm going to do everything I can because I want to show up for you because I value you. You being in my life and having you in relationship and building that trust means I got an ally on my side. When I go hunting, I don't have to go hunting by myself. It's primal, it's instinctual. So that's why we show up for each other because we need each other. The reason why we sell ourselves out is because, well, I just want to make it easier on myself. That's what my brain tells me to do. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense, man. I mean, growing up, my dad would always be like, you need to do hard stuff. I never understood it as a kid, being like, why would I do hard stuff? That makes no sense, right? Like, why don't I just do it the easy way, right?
Mhm.
And then as I've really gotten into working out and all the stuff that I do, my routines and all, I see just how powerful doing a hard thing is. That even if you don't complete it, the act of trying to do it puts you above, and not above in like the moral sense, but above in like what you're capable, what you know you're capable of doing than like 50% of people off the bat, right? I mean, something crazy where I think it's like top 1% of podcasts only takes 21 episodes,
Mhm.
right? Because that's how low the bar is now because people have just been so disconnected from doing anything hard. So I guess my question on that is how do we get back to doing hard things? Say a young guy doesn't have anyone around him where he really looks up to for working out, or he's kind of by himself in maybe a not so nice area and he wants to get out, he wants to improve himself, but he doesn't know what to do. What hard things, how does he start to do that?
Well, let me ask you a question first. I love that your dad told you that you need to do hard things, right? Shout out to your dad. Shout out. I mean, more dads need to tell their children that, I think. But did your dad tell you why? Or did he just say you need to do hard things?
He said, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something along the lines of like, life is tough, Jake, and either you can let it run over you or you can start to build some armor to let it bounce off you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's brilliant, man. And again, shout out to your dad. That's some really solid dad advice, I think. I say similar things to my boy who's about to turn 8. And the reason why you said, how do you get someone to choose to do hard things? They need to be enrolled in why, for the sake of what? Why am I going to take this cold plunge? Right? Why would I do that? When we bring guys out and we bring them out on these fasts and they come out with us and they give up food and they go out by themselves in the wilderness, you're like, why would I do that? Why would I pay you money to take me on an adventure where I'm going to not eat and be alone for 4 days? Like, it goes so far against the, again, that the brain mechanisms that say, no, we want food, we want shelter, we want people, because that's where comfort and the certainty of life feels greater. Understanding just how important that is, that when I brace myself and prepare my nervous system to handle harder and more challenging things, it makes the challenging things that I cannot avoid, that I don't choose, that I don't see coming, more tenable. It makes it such that I don't have to run away from those things, that I don't crumble, that I don't escape or try to avoid. We have an epidemic in avoidance and resistance in our society, especially in our younger generations of men. I know because I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. The substance abuses that I've done in my past, the addictions to sex, the addiction to YouTube and social media, all of this is a function of people who are not willing to face and do uncomfortable things. It's really all it is. I mean, I'm sure I might be oversimplifying it. There's definitely other factors involved, and everybody's case is a little bit unique. But all of that is a reflection of people that I see who just aren't willing and ready to embrace the challenges of life. And I remember what that felt like. I love how my parents raised me and prepared me. I think that I got a better start and a better opportunity than many people do on this planet. And I still felt wildly unprepared for just how difficult life is. It's very hard. It's very hard to have all of the things that many people want. To have a life partner is hard. That's a lifetime's worth of work in and of itself, is having a committed partnership, right? That's one thing. And then you want to layer children on top of that. And then you want to give those children a good life. And you want to set those children up better than you had when you were a kid. And then on top of that, you also want to make an impact on the world and you want to help other people in your community. You start stacking these things up, and smoking a blunt is a lot more appealing than taking on that mountain, right? So that's why people say no to this all the time, is because it feels so grand. And you know what? It is. I'd be lying to anybody if I said that my life was easy. My life is very fulfilling, but it's very hard. It's very challenging. Every day is a challenge. Every day is very difficult. In fact, I talk to a lot of guys who want to start their own company, who want to start their own men's organization. And I don't ever try to talk anybody out of it, but I'm also not afraid to let people know just what it takes. Really quick story, and I'll kick it back over to you because I know I'm kind of running off here. I showed up to one of my men's team meetings about 6 years ago, and this was when my son was 2. We were pregnant, having our next one, and I said to my team, I'm committed to make $500,000 this year. And at this time, I was not in a position where I was making $500,000. I was shooting not only for the stars, I was shooting for Jupiter. And although maybe the stars are farther off than that, so I was shooting for like the way off stars with that. And one of the guys on my team looked at me and goes, "Huh, you sure about that?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, because all I thought was making that amount of money was going to solve all the problems that I had in that moment." And he's like, "Okay, do you have any idea what it takes to make $500,000?" And I was like, "Well, no, I've never done it before. I can't say that I do." And he said, "If I told you what it took to make that amount of money, you wouldn't choose that. Not the Jeddy that I know. The Jeddy that I know, the Jeddy who is on purpose, who's on point, who's committed to his family, and he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to sacrifice the things that it would take." And this is a man much older and wiser than me, so I believed him in that, and he was right, you know. And I think that I do think it is possible to be financially successful and professionally successful and have a family and be present with your children, but that's like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. I know people who are wildly financially successful, and there's always something else that they've sacrificed along the way that I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice. So That's the other thing is just the conversation of sacrifice and knowing, like asking. So going back to how do you get somebody to choose hard things? You let them know what it's going to take and invite them, consider what it might take. It might take you giving up some sleep, it might take you partying with your friends, it might take you chasing girls and trying to get laid all the time, right? It might take you not being the most popular or whatever. And that's why it's so important to really identify what you care about, because we only have so many hours in the day and so much vital energy to work with.
Y- I don't even know where to start with that, man. It was so good. Definitely noticed the sacrifice piece. I think that there's a really good quote I think I've seen before. It's like you get to choose what regrets you want in life, right? You get to choose. Like I would rather regret this than this, right? So for
Yeah.
me right now, I am one of those crazy people who want to start a business, and you know, I have full faith that I can do it. And if you would probably tell me everything that would be required of it, I'd probably be like, I don't know if I really want to do that. But I like the hard things now. I've built that muscle to be attracted to the hard things. And I think my way in was really, fitness, right? I started with one way in and I've kind of just built this muscle up that now I can start to spread out,
Hmm.
throughout my life, which has been awesome to see. And I can share that with people because I didn't really think I'd be making an impact at this young of an age. You thought it'd have to be like way later. But once you find that one thing and you can start to make that impact, it's like, oh, wow, I want to do this rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing better than it.
Totally, man. And like I said, I would never try to talk you out of chasing something. Because here's the thing. You start your own business and you put everything that you've got into it, and who knows, 2, 3, however many years down the line, you decide, dude, this is not for me. I know that you're gonna walk away with valuable experience. That's the thing, is I remember as a young man, a younger man, I still consider myself a young man, but a younger man, I I had this belief that I could just pick one thing and then I could just get busy on it forever. And I didn't even know who I was back then. If I did pick something and put everything I had into it for a much longer duration, it wouldn't really reflect the man that I was evolving into and changing into. And so um you got to be a little bit delirious to raise the bar in your life. Like, you got to be delirious, you got to be a little bit crazy. If I knew everything it was going to take to get married, have a family, chase my dreams, and have a big vision and start multiple companies and do all that stuff, man, if I really knew, then yeah, I would have definitely hesitated. I would have bought, I might not have done it. I might not have, man, because it is not easy. But part of that delirium is what is what paves the way for greatness, and not even just greatness, but a higher level of performance.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, I love it. I love when I see young guys going for it. It's inspiring, right? It's inspiring. One of the old guys on my team, he says, young blood makes old blood boil. I've been hearing that ever since I've been on the team, but they don't say it to me as much anymore because there's a couple guys younger than me now. I'm like, damn, guy, am I getting old? Am I the old blood now? But yeah, man, it's true. We need each other. The elders, they are able to reflect wisdom down the line, and the youngers, they give energy and optimism up the line. It's another example of that reciprocal relationship.
Mentorship, dude, has been, I think, huge as I've noticed. I hear it in a lot of men's, conventional wisdom. They're like, get a mentor, find a mentor, mentor this, mentor that, but they never really go into why. Right?
Hmm.
They're more of the general, just go find one. But they don't say what you should look for in one, like, and kind of the relationship you should have for one, or how to even go about finding one.
Hmm.
Right. So what would you tell a guy who's really struggling to find a mentor? Like, how do I even start to do this?
Yeah. Oh, this is great, man. Good question. So I was doing an interview with a man named Shems Hartwell. He's out. I think he's still out in the Hawaiian Islands. Great man. We were having an awesome conversation, and I referenced that because in our dialogue back and forth, I realized that there's this thing called the father avatar, right? The ideal man that I want to be. And that avatar has been shaped by all of the best men and their traits and characteristics and what they modeled for me in my life, and the not so great men and what they modeled in their lives, and the things that I want for myself, the man I want to be, and the things that I don't want for myself or the man I want to be. And I got to expose myself to enough of these different types of people to gather enough evidence and data to decide what that man looks like. And then I can start practicing becoming that man. So when you ask about mentorship, and I think one of the reasons why people don't explain why or how to do that is because they just know that that's a requirement. Like, I don't care where you are in your life, you can't figure it all out on your own. That's how people become narcissistic, is they start to believe their own brand of bullshit too much, and that's the only narrative and story that you can tell and that you're subscribed to. So I would say when you see someone or come into contact with somebody that's like, something about that person, they got something that I want. It might not even be an objective metric. It might just be, dude, I like the way that guy Jacob talks, like the way he presents. There's something about his energy, the way he shows up, his patience, whatever that is. Go and ask that person to go have a coffee. Right? Or just go ask that person, say, hey, can I just sit down and have a conversation with you? Really, it just starts there. There's not like a formal interview process for mentorship. You just go and you spend more time with the people who inspire something in you, who light something up in you. And the interesting thing about, I think we have this story that we don't want to inconvenience people or burden them with something because everybody's so busy. But I've had so many wonderful people who have helped me become the man that I am, that I love being asked to support somebody. And I also know that I got a lot going on in my life. But I'm responsible for my boundaries. If somebody says, hey, Jeddy, I'd love to spend some more time with you. I actually just had a dude at the gym today, young man. I think he's 21 years old. We were just sitting in the sauna and he was just, I could tell he wanted to connect. So we're having a little conversation. And he says to me, he's like, I'm really looking for somebody to work out with. He's like, it looks like you know what you're doing. I'm looking for a workout buddy. Can you be that person? And I looked at him. I said, hey, man, you know what? I don't know if I can be that person for you all the time, but anytime that I'm here and you see me and you want to work out, just pull me aside. Let's go do it. But I can't commit to being your workout buddy right now. I got so much going on. I'm in here at like 5:30 a.m. in the morning. I don't know if that's going to work for you based on what you told me, but anytime I'm here, and that's me getting to put up my boundaries for myself. Right. So if you see somebody that inspires something in you, somebody who's got a brand of something that you want more of for yourself, or you think you do, because I've also had mentors. I'm like, dude, that guy's got something. He's got something. And then a few years down the line, I'm like, ooh, he's also got some things I don't like that I didn't realize or I didn't see before. Okay, well, I'll take the things that are useful and I'll just leave aside the rest.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes. He says, observe everything, observe it all, take it all in, and then determine what's useful from that wide net that you cast, and then get rid of everything else. And whatever you held on to, make it uniquely your own. That's how we become the man that we want to be, by first surveying everything, the good, the bad, the awesome, the ugly, and then shaping that and molding that into the version of the man we want to be, and then showing up for it. And that's when things like vision and values and standards really become useful.
So to that, there's a follow-up question is, say that your guy who isn't a mentor has none of those that you just described. Like, I was lucky enough to kind of know where mine was because I did martial arts growing up. I had, some family around me. So we're talking the baseline. Like, I don't know good values. I want to be better. I don't know how. How do I start to conceive these ethereal things and put them to paper?
In that case, if you're really living on an island, literally or energetically, and you're like, I don't even know where to find these men, because they're all around. And I'm not saying that, the guy around the corner who owns a shop is going to give you everything that you need to know about being a man. But I guarantee you, he's got something, even if he's going to show you what not to do. But if you really feel like you're that alone, that's why we started The Rising Man, is because I know that there's some men out there that are going to listen to a podcast. They're going to say, whoa, something about what Jeddy said there really resonates with me. Cool. Well, go over to the website, get yourself registered in the community, and then start spending some time around a whole bunch of different men who are all determined to be better versions of themselves. At least I can guarantee you that it'll be a safe enough place for you to explore and figure out what it is that you want to surround yourself with and create for yourself. That's why we started Rising Man, honestly, dude. I mean, I didn't start the podcast thinking I didn't have a whole business plan. All I wanted to do was have conversations about what it meant to be a man. And then the community and our programs and our ceremonies and all the things that we offer for men, it all came because that's what the community was asking for. That's what the men were asking for. Right. So I mean, that's what we're here for, man. But I would also say that there's if you just open up your eyes and look around, there's plenty of people out there who can offer you something. If you feel that closed off or that untrusting of the people around you, it probably has more to do with the fact that it's hard to feel safe in this world. It's hard to trust that people aren't going to hurt you, because a lot of us have been hurt at early ages by people. So you gotta take a risk and challenge that story. Adults don't hurt each other as much as kids do. I think adults are generally a little bit more.
I agree with that.
Kids, man, are just so, oh man, it's scary. I worry about my kids. Like, it's just they're growing up in such a strange time and place. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think in generally speaking, adults, we recognize that because we've been through it before, that if there's somebody that I can help, of course I'm going to do it. That's also built into our DNA.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think back to when I was in college, or even before that, really, like, fifth, sixth grade, and I was, bullied really badly. Like, had one friend, felt cut off from everyone, and being like, what is going on? Why is everyone being so, brutal to me all the time? And as I evolved out of that, I look back and I see the younger generation who have cyberbullying was still not really a thing when I was there, and I was never a big social media guy to begin with. But I hear some of these stories now, and I'm like, how do you function in that? How do you function in 24/7? Like, they can destroy your avatar of yourself who you've crafted online. Everyone can see it all the time for all of history.
Mm,
At sixth grade, you should not be handling that. Even in like college era, that's still a lot to handle, right?
mm,
So I definitely think going to find a mentor is mandatory. I had a couple. I had my dad. I had my grandfather, who I've shared about with you. I had my martial arts instructor. So I've been lucky to have some, but I definitely think Rising Man is needed because a lot of guys don't, right? Or the ones they choose to look online for, like the Andrew Tates, or they're just they don't really promote being a man in like a real holistic sense. It's like this. They say, "Oh, like be a man," but don't really talk about your feelings, or be a human. It's like, be this ideal that doesn't really exist in real life, which I
well,
definitely have noticed.
that's another important conversation. Is a lot of the men's work that's gotten a lot of attention has been the polarization of what masculinity is or can look like. I think for such a long time, being a man was being stoic and not showing emotions, not showing feelings, being strong for everybody else. And we saw the consequences of that. Right? We already talked about that. We're still human beings, and we cannot contain all of that energy and all those emotions for too long. It has consequences. And then a lot of this work and a lot of these people who started leading other men, they introduced vulnerability as a concept. And it was amazing, because now all of a sudden, these men who were walking around holding grenades in their hands could put them down and could talk about what was really going on. And then at some point, that got taken too far to the end of the spectrum, where now guys will use their emotions as an excuse from showing up for people who can depend on them, because that's also a part of our DNA, right? I mean, I really think our biology informs us of so much, where we are by nature a bigger and stronger and more physically capable part of the human species that can protect and provide and do certain biological functions, generally speaking. Right, there's plenty of women out there who are way stronger than I am now, but just generally speaking, right, our biology, it directs us in certain ways. And to be to become an emotional puddle all the time, where I can't provide any kind of containment or space for anybody to feel safe, that's too far on the other end of the spectrum. So we start swinging back the other way, and then Andrew Tate becomes really popular because he's saying, stop being a victim, don't be a pussy, like and then it's this new version of an old brand of masculinity that's on the other end, where I'm always an advocate for, hey man, bring your everything here to this space, because there's men here and we can hold it together. This is where you unfold. This is where you unravel. You don't have to go out back into the world and be an emotional shell. You don't have to be emotionless, but at least learn to be in command of your emotions so that when people do depend on you, when people are counting on you to be the most anchored and rooted and emotionally regulated person in the room, you can be that. But that you don't have to hold that grenade for a year, 10 years, 20 years. You can put it down, you can come back here and you can unravel in this safe space with these men. And we can do that for each other when we need it, because we're going to need it. At some point in time, it's going to have to happen. So I really think it just comes down to balance. There's, I don't love Andrew Tate as an example of modern masculinity, but there's definitely parts of what he's saying, especially when you read in between the lines of what he's saying, is like, hey, you're not as weak as you think you are. You don't have to be weak, and there's so much more that you could be. There's a part of his message that's saying that. And guys like Elliot Hulse too, right? Like I don't even subscribe to these guys. I don't even watch these guys much because I just don't like the extra is what I don't like, right? The essence is actually not so bad, but the extra is too much. But the same is true for these guys who are leading guys to just be in their emotions all the time and to only know how to be in their emotional space and using their emotions as an excuse for being a victim and putting up these pseudo boundaries between people. Because that's also doesn't really prepare a man to be in the world and to be in full expression of himself. So I think it really comes down to balance. And that's, I think that's where men arrive at once we swing from left to right a little bit. It's like, oh, I can do all of that.
Dude, it's so funny you say balance because I know I look back even in my addiction, all the stuff I've dealt with, I've gone one end of the pendulum, gone the other, and then whenever I get back to center and things kind of settle, it's like I get the best of both worlds. And I really had that realization not that long ago and was like, wow, literally the answer to everything I try and do is like just balance it. If I can just balance it, I know as soon as I start one thing, I'm going to go really far one way, and then I'm going to come back the other way, and then I'll go to middle, and that's where I'm supposed to stay. And
Yeah.
that's such a cool insight to have. I think a lot of guys have a trouble, at least I had trouble with really defining, what is a man? Because I used interchangeably masculine, man, and what was the last one you said?
Male.
And male. So explain the differences because up until hearing you say that, I
Mhm.
had never heard that they were different concepts.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole point, is that those three words, male, man, and masculine, have been historically roped under the same category. I would even bet that if you go far back enough in the thesaurus, that male, masculine, and man were synonymous with each other. This was a distinction I first got from one of my really good brothers named Sean Berry, so I want to give him credit for this. That male is a biological distinction that we make about humans based on their genitals, right? And I know that there's a whole much larger conversation about gender and gender classification, identification, but where it originated from was male meant you had external genitalia, female meant you had internal genitalia, period, right? Masculine, right? Feminine. To me, the way I look at those two words is just it's one word that captures a certain category of characteristics. And maybe we don't all agree on exactly what that is, but masculine tends to be more linear, more scientific, more strategic, singular focused. I think of fire. I think of warriors focusing on one singular thing. It has nothing to do with genitals. It just has to do with those qualities that we assign to that word. Feminine being the opposite, less structured, a little more free, a little more open, in the flow. Think of water. Oftentimes I like to use fire and water instead of masculine and feminine because those are just two words that capture certain qualities. And then we look at man and we look at woman, right? Obviously, man has usually been associated with males who have external genitals. But as we know, we've got people who are going through all different types of gender transformational journeys. And to me, man is really just an identifier. And I do think it's still useful. And that's why we call ourselves the rising man, because the journey of man, I think, is very unique to the journey of woman and the journey of child. I think being a man on this planet still carries with it a unique quality that allows us who identify as men to relate to one another. I know you identify as a man, Jacob. So when we talk about how you doing as a man, like man to man, how you doing? How's that journey going? There's a dialogue that you and I can have that's different than the one I would have with my wife, who identifies as a woman and who recognizes that her journey as a woman is different than my journey as a man. We're also humans underneath all of that, right? We're all humans. So I can relate to my wife about the human experience. But when we start looking at the difference between the men's experience and the women's experience, I do think that there's a distinction to be made there. So yeah, I think sometimes it's just gotten clustered together, and that they are different experiences, and it's important to know what we're talking about.
You said something about a man's journey. What do you think are the key tenets of that? Because I think a lot of that has been convoluted as this like Indiana Jones esque adventure in the wilderness, and like Raiders of
That's
the
a part
Lost
of it.
Ark.
That's a chapter in every man's story, right? There's a woman named Allison Armstrong. I don't think I've ever mentioned her name to you, Jacob. You should check out her stuff. So she does a lecture series, and one of her things she talks about is the amazing development of men. Everybody should go check that out, because she basically it's an archetypal system. She looks at the different stages of ordinary men's development. And she talks about that period of life where we just have to go out and have fun and adventure. It's two words: fun and adventure, fun and adventure, fun and adventure. It's essentially equates to post-puberty, adolescence, young manhood, before we're ready to settle down and get committed to things. We can't commit to anything because all we care about is fun and adventure and gathering experiences. She calls it knighthood. And a lot of men, young men, have gotten villainized for doing that natural function that all men have to go through. In fact, it's more damaging when men don't fully entertain their knighthood and then get into what she calls princehood, and then later on king, before they're ready to. Those are the guys who end up divorced. Those are the guys who go through midlife crises because they didn't go through all of that fun and adventure to identify who they were and then build a life around that. A lot of men start building a kingdom. They get the wife, they get the kids, they start the job, they build the career before they really got connected to who they are. So when you ask me, what's that signature function of being a man? What's that journey like? It has a lot to do with purpose. And I know that's another word that's getting thrown around a lot, but what is it that you uniquely must do with your life on an essential level? Who you must be. Otherwise, we might as well not call you Jacob anymore, because you'd be a shell of the man that I know. What are those things? And I don't think that we're all born into this life knowing what they were. I used to be a physical therapist. I thought that I was going to be in the medical field, in the healthcare field. That's how I was going to help people. But my purpose was allowed to evolve because I took risks and I quit jobs and I traveled and I gave myself the experiences I needed to identify who I was. And a little bit of it was some luck along the way to encounter the right people that helped mirror that back. I think that's a really important part of it, though, is identifying that purpose. And even beyond that, just because it's such a overly used word, I think, these days, understanding the essence of who you are and what are the things that you won't compromise or cannot compromise to be in relationship with somebody or to take a certain kind of job. Because when you know those things, it's easy to commit to anything. But until you know those things, you won't commit to anything. Or you might try to, but you'll end up breaking promises and breaking hearts.
Very true, man. I mean, I heard you say, and it was funny. I was going to bring this topic up next, is mirror, right? So I was going to bring up the interview. I think a lot of guys, this would help to hear this practice of how we do that, because I definitely had done some self work because I was forced to look in that mirror, up in Washington by myself, to like, okay, who am I? What am I? All of those questions. But for guys who are in the comfort zone and they are numbed out and doled out and around people who are not helping them, the interview, I think, is a great tool. So I kind of want you to touch on that, and how guys could apply that in their own lives.
Well, what makes the interview work? I mean, it's for people who don't know what that is. It's very much what it sounds like. It's being in a space with people who are asking you questions that are helping you come to your own truth and your own discovery. What makes interviews work is having whoever's being interviewed, right? We call it the hot seat. Whoever's on the hot seat being committed and determined to tell the truth, right? I could ask you some hard questions about yourself and you could totally lie to me, Jacob. And you probably wouldn't get much out of that interview. If you just said all the quote unquote right answers to get over with the interview and convince everybody that you're doing better than you actually are, and nothing's going to really change. But if you're determined to uncover the truth and share the truth about where you're at, what's going on, then the interview can be a completely transformational process. It requires being in a space where you're not worried about being judged. That's really hard. Going back to all those bullying experiences that we've had, it's hard to trust that that's going to happen, especially with men. I know we've been hard on each other over the years, especially as kids. Boys brutal with one another when we're younger. So it's hard for some men to trust other men, and you got to take that risk to prove yourself a little bit different. But asking those questions, the reason why we ask questions is I don't know what you need in your life. I don't know what's true for you, but I can ask you questions that put you on the spot, and you'll have that moment, right? Those interviews are the best ones are when you see a guy freeze and you could tell that he could lie and say what's not true, and that might be a little bit easier, or he could tell the truth, and then he's going to be exposed, and then he's going to have that that's what's going on moment. But that's what always leads to knowing yourself better. So really, when it comes to the interview, it's helping men to get to the truth of the matter, of what's really going on, and then from there determine, okay, cool. Well, hey, you're not unique. That thing that you just admitted to that felt so heavy, look around the circle. Everybody here can relate to that. Has done it in the past or is doing it now. We've all been there before. Question now is, what are you going to do about it? And that's where being on a team is really useful, because if you have different guys coming in and out every week, you don't ever reach that same level of depth. And even if you do, because you can achieve depth with, I've seen it happen in a room of 100 guys who just met each other for the first time. It's easy to go deep in the right space, under the right circumstances. We can go deep really fast. But if we get back together a week later and it's 100 different faces, we're starting all over from the beginning. So when we're talking about team, when we're talking about brotherhood, we're talking about building lasting relationships with continuity that provide the level of accountability that lead to transformation and change. Because that's what we all want at the end of the day. We want to grow. We want to become better versions of ourselves. We want to hit our goals and our targets. And that doesn't happen by just randomly associating yourself with different people all the time.
I mean, again, man, hits it home for me. I think the sanctity of going back to that circle and like seeing the same guys and being like, I got deep with you and you understand me and I can take more risks and go further and further. That starts to like go out into every area of your life. I've noticed. I'm starting to think about, like how can I start to, build my stuff over here, and go the path less traveled. And I see so many guys and it hurts me to see that are turned off and they're robotic and life's just pulling them along. So I think my last question is, how, when you see someone who's turned off, do you not force them to find that light for themselves, but how do you start to like just get it to flicker? How do you say, hey, did you ever think you could be more than just like, a 9 to 5 office worker?
Yeah, I think anybody can muster up those words and say them to somebody else, but it really means something when you can tell that it's genuine. And what allows me to say that genuinely to somebody else is to pause long enough to see them and to listen and to understand just what their circumstances are. I've always been an optimistic person, but especially after what I've seen over the years. Like I said, I've been doing this work more than half of my lifetime now, right? Like legit, I've been doing this more than half a lifetime, and I've seen some really incredible things. I was just talking to a man the other day who was talking about his battles with alcohol and how it's ruined his family. And I said to him, I said, you know what? This could be the first chapter of the greatest story ever told. And I know that because I've seen people write that story. There's a lot more examples of this being the final chapter, and it ends in tragedy. There's no happy warm fuzzies at the end of the day. Sometimes the story goes the other way, but I really believe in the power of humanity, and that there's really no dark place that someone cannot pull themselves out of. Sometimes they just need a hand. Sometimes they just need somebody to shine the light, because the dark cellar of your soul can be damp and dark and wet, and sometimes there's no light in there. And sometimes you just need to be able to see that there's a little flicker at the end of the tunnel. And I don't lie to people. I've taken a vow to stop lying to people and telling them what they want to hear. So when I see an opportunity to be honest with somebody, I'll tell them. I'll say, this could be the greatest story ever told, and it's going to be really hard. And you're going to slip and you're going to fall and you're going to, want to go back the other direction. I know it because I've been there myself. But I really believe that everybody can get above the circumstances in their lives. There's too many wonderful and incredible examples of ordinary humans doing that on this planet. Certain people are born with certain gifts and talents and skills, but no amount of talent or skill can is greater than pure heart and determination. And everybody has that capacity. So,
Couldn't agree more, man. I appreciate you. I love you. People want to keep up with you. Where can they find you?
yeah, man. I know a lot of people are on the gram. So at Rising Man Movement is everything Rising Man. Any information you want is there. At Jeddy Azuma, that's my personal. I definitely show a little bit more of my personal side there. Yeah, and if you just want to connect, just send a message on that platform. If you want to know more about what we're doing in Rising Man, you can go to risingman.org. That'll give you a better glimpse of what our community is all about, what our mission is about, and how you can get involved directly.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, dude, this is great, man. Good luck, and I can't wait to come back on 200 episodes from now and reflect on this one.
I'm gonna hold you to that now.
You don't have to hold me too hard, man. I'll be here.
Awesome.
All right, brother.